Welcome to the Energizing India podcast. My name is Ravin Mirchandani, and on this program, we focus on the electric mobility sector in India, exploring faster ways for adoption of electric and clean mobility in India. So far in this program, we've spoken to key protagonists, industry leaders, opinion makers, and decision makers from the entire ecosystem. We've talked to people from the grid, power distribution companies, charge point operators, vehicle OEMs, battery manufacturers, and a host of other people who contribute to the value chain of EV. And today we go back to the OEM sector, but in a unique way. We talk today to Dhawal Khullar. Pravaig is a very interesting company because not only are they involved in many sectors of the EV ecosystem, they're also designing an electric car that is meant to be a luxury car, which will not be freely available for private use, but only for fleets and luxury hotel and travel tour operators. Pravaig will also make its own battery packs and also make other parts of the EV eco chain, including artificial intelligence solutions for autonomous vehicles. Founded in 2011, the company has recently signed funding from the Groupe Eren of France. Welcome to the program, Dhawal.
Hey, Ravin, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dhawal, I hope next time you'll come to the studio in Pune rather than doing this on Zoom. We've been doing a lot of research on your company, and you're a very interesting bunch of folks. Founded in 2011 in Jaipur to work on EV technology way before anybody in India was even looking at it seriously. I mean, you had Elon Musk, who started in 2008 to 2009. The only other person who was doing anything EV in India around that time was Naveen Munjal from Hero Motors. Everything else came afterwards. What prompted you to dive into electric vehicles so early when it would have been almost impossible to get anyone's attention, leave alone funding?
Many factors were involved back then. So I think to answer this question in a better way, I think I should tell you more about myself as well. First, what is my background, how we got into, how the automotive bug bit us. So when I was a small child, I used to I always have had a knack for engineering. All things mechanical, all sort of machineries, they have always interested me. There was a bike, a very famous bike owned by Mr. J. Leno back then. It's called the Y2K. It's powered by a gas turbine as well. So I got into gas turbines. They are very cool, awesome machines. They can run on any fuel. But again, the limiting factor was the fuel. You need to have the fuel, and they are guzzlers. They consume fuel at a massive rate, and fuel, supply chain issues, quality issues, and then you have to transport that fuel. And if you are in the middle of nowhere, then you have to build a supply chain just to transport that fuel around. In fact, a very similar problem is faced by not just ours, all armed forces in the world. You have a base station at a remote location, and then to run one vehicle, you are running 7 more vehicles just for the logistics of that fuel. And coming to electricity is something which is relatively more straightforward with respect to logistics. And even if you can't transport it, it's much modular when it comes to producing it. You can produce it using solar, you can produce it using nuclear, you can produce it, if you have a river flowing next door, you can produce electricity. So it's a universally accepted thing.
So you decided to go into EVs because it's a universal form of energy, but my question was about why so early, and what was the impact of being in this industry so early when I'm sure nobody took you seriously, right? Even 4 years ago when we were talking to ICE companies about EVs, they used to laugh us out of the room. So how was that? Well, first, why did you choose to go on so early, and how was that whole experience from 2011 to 2018 or 19 when you reincorporated yourselves in Bangalore, moving from Jaipur and got down to a focused business plan in the direction of this car and battery that you're making?
Okay, so back in 2011, you are absolutely right. Nobody took us seriously, but the key problem in electrics is the batteries or the energy storage. And back in 2011, this was a big problem. Most commercial batteries you could find were either lead acid or nickel cadmium and stuff like that. Lithium-Ion was around, but back then the costs were super high. So to be very honest, back in 2011, the prototypes that we built, they were not fully electric. because we simply could not figure out an energy an energy storage system which is light enough and good enough for a reasonable range and performance. And for the record, one thing we set out in stone in the very early days is that we'll never make a boring product. We'll never make a product which is, kind of runs, but it's slow, it's not boring, In other words, never a washing machine on wheels. So ultimately, somewhere along the timeline between then and now, we figured all of these things out, started working on. So one of our the better prototypes is called the Extinction Mark 1. You may have seen it. It's a white prototype, and it's called Extinction because we have been following a evolutionary theme when it comes to how we name our prototypes.
So all the advertising now for EVs that are launched says range of up to 300 or 350 or 495 or 500. For our average listeners who are not from the EV industry and who want to understand what that means, what are the different conditions that impact the range of an EV, and why is this an issue? Why is, kitna deti hai is the story in the ICE industry, and when an average is 10, it's usually 9.5 to 10.5 kilometers a liter. Yet in an EV, there's so many variations, isn't there? There's temperature, there's other road conditions. So what are the things that impact the range of a vehicle?
Okay, so there are four key fundamentals which impact the range of any vehicle, be it electric or ICE engine. So the first three they come under the category of road loads. One is the rolling resistance of your tires. So no matter what road surface you are rolling your wheels on, there is a certain resistance. This resistance changes if you have very good smooth roads. This value is very, very low. The standard value for this is like most modern tires today will have a value of 0.008 for the on tarmac. But as you go on, say, gravelly roads or sand, this value rises. So the surface on which you are driving, it has a huge impact on the range. Second variable is the aerodynamics, and aerodynamics it's a cubic function. So like if you increase your speed by 2x, your resistance will increase as a cubic function. And the third variable is the gradient. Gradient means like if you're driving up a hill. So, of course, you have to fight gravity as well, along with the rolling resistance and aerodynamic loads. Now, the fourth variable is the temperature, as you said. And this is more related to human comfort. So, the hotter it gets or the colder it gets, you'll end up spending energy to either cool your cabin down or to heat it up. So, yeah, these are the four fundamental variables.
So, you talked about smooth versus gravelly roads. So, smooth road means longer range or lesser range?
Smooth roads mean better range.
So all of the startups in India have chosen to make a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler, and yet you've gone for a very difficult segment.
Right.
The Indian automotive sector, the Tata Group has only just launched its first 3 or 4 electric vehicles, and the global majors are bringing theirs, which evidently are retrofits as well. There's very few cars that are from a zero base, like the Kia EV6 or the Hyundai Ioniq. Not retrofits, but started from scratch. You attacked a very difficult part of the market. So what problem are you addressing as Pravaig in the 4-wheel section? Because you're attacking a very unique niche within the market, which is not private ownership, but fleet owners for a very targeted segment of travel and hotels. What's the problem that you think that you're addressing that will make you successful?
There are multiple problems we are trying to solve here, in fact. So the first problem is building the necessary capabilities. And in other words, it comes down to building the necessary technologies, if I may. For example, the batteries that we manufacture today, we have energy densities of north of 180 watt-hour per kilograms. And now in order to build technology, it takes research and development to build technology. And as a result, I'm pretty sure you might have observed a trickle-down effect across the automotive domain already. It's already happening. So, as an example, if you look at a Mercedes-Benz S-Class 10 years before, it will have technologies which nobody else had at that point of time. But eventually, over time, those technologies have trickled out, and like you buy a Hyundai i20, for example, today it will have most of those features already. So now one thing to have a good technology tree is to start with a more difficult problem. why do I say building a more premium vehicle is a more difficult problem is because the costs are higher, and the expectations of the end users are also higher. Of course, our customers will hate us if we end up building a vehicle which does not keep the promise of the specified range, or does not ride like a boat, or the ride is too hard, or is not comfortable in general.
So what price point will you be coming at? Is it the 25 lakh, 40 lakh? Where are you pegging yourselves?
I'll say that it will be hovering around the 40.
So I'm interested, Dhawal, how much of this car have you guys actually designed yourself, and how much is commercial off the shelf stuff? I mean, have you designed everything right down to the drivetrain, the motor, the chassis, or have you had lots of support to do that and you focused on the battery pack and the motor? Where's the key competencies to ensure you're delivering exactly what you talked about: safety, drive experience, range?
Right. So to answer this, so we build and engineer most of the vehicles, and of course there are certain components like drivetrains. Today we are not building our own drivetrains, because if we start doing that, we can definitely start doing that, but it's a very long development cycle. You build prototypes, you validate them, then you figure out how to mass produce them, etc., etc. And so today we are building our own battery packs for sure. We are building our chassis systems. We are engineering the entirety of the interiors, the exteriors, the aerodynamics, suspension. Suspension systems are in fact one of our key strengths. And I don't know if you have seen our previous prototypes, but some of them are like hardcore off-road machines. Like one of them is actually built, like you can go to Dakar Rally, it will pass the scrutiny and survive. And so suspension is something which is one of our key strengths. And and then there are certain subsystems, like for example, it really does not make sense for Pravaig today to build our own airbags, for example. So there are certain areas which we have a supply chain for certain areas, like say the door seals, and in these areas we co-work with these guys. So then airbags is one area. Then there are certain wheel bearings we don't make ourselves, wheels as well, tires also. So there are some parts which we co-work with our vendor base.
Okay. There's been a question ringing around my head since you said the price of 40 lakhs, so I'm going to put it to you, because we face the same position. We make a quality EV charger. It's not as cheap as a lot of Indian products. It's pegged at a European quality point, but cheaper in terms of the same product. But India doesn't reward that. India rewards the cheapest product. India rewards the Tata Nexon, four-doors, no matter which segment you're looking at, because that's the mentality. It's a 0-1 digital game on where is the cheapest product available. So how are you going to overcome that? Or have you just decided not to overcome it and look at exports? Or is it the fact that you're going to be a niche player making just a few thousand units a year, so long as you cover them, you've covered your expenses and costs and you will be profitable, so it doesn't really matter? How do you plan to overcome the one weakness of price?
Although I fully agree with you that like it's a bit challenging for the masses to see, like we are more conditioned to look at the short-term prices versus the long-term price. And one of the beauties of our vehicles is that although the initial cost is X, and to be honest, we are really not bad. We are in fact, I truly believe that we are at par or in fact better with, say, if you end up importing an EV from outside. Price-wise, we are for sure better than that. And of course, building most of the parts locally it definitely helps that cause. And as an example, like more than 70% of the vehicle volume-wise is built locally today, and we are working hard to increase this figure as the time goes by. And one thing is, since you also mentioned, you touched the topic of volumes as well. So the immediate project that we are working on is set as per annum we'll be making 2,500 of these cars.
So I have a question, Dhawal. We know that a number of people from the automotive industry listen to our podcast, and when you said that number, 2,500 vehicles in your first run, I'm sure a number of them would be incredulous of how Pravaig will break even or make money at such a small volume. So can you talk a little bit about that? How are you going to be profitable at low volumes?
When it comes to profitability, so here we have to look at the overall business model. So there are multiple reasons we have chosen to push strongly towards fleet utilization. So the number one reason is it is very much possible for us to say sell the vehicle to someone and just use it. And of course there are people in India. India has a lot of rich people who can very well afford our vehicles, as long as they like it and it's good enough for them. So one is the accessibility of the vehicle is much higher. It's not just a vehicle is not just locked on to me or you. Much more people can utilize it. Even though the initial cost is slightly higher than the rest, but the value proposition is one of the beauties of electric vehicles is the running costs are super low. And to give you a comparison, so the present prototype that we have, it's in fact a bit old now, the Mark 1. It is pretty close to a BMW 7 Series when it comes to the weight or the size or the comfort levels. Now, a BMW 7 Series will cost you around 12 to 15 rupees per kilometer, assuming it's a diesel. And the same vehicle, similar performance levels, in fact better. This prototype costs us, if we charge it, slowly, off at our home. But yeah, in such a situation, the vehicle costs us 90 paisa per kilometer to run.
Okay, very big difference.
It's a massive difference.
Okay, but that's breaking even for the customer. But how do you keep your cost base as an automotive company low enough to be such a low volume manufacturer and still have all of the overheads of manufacturing a full vehicle? Right? What's the secret there, Dhawal?
Okay, so to be honest, it's not the business model is not built to that we. So assume today we manufacture 2,500 cars and next year we are rolling in money. It does not work like that. It's more of long term, and as a result, the vehicles are also built to last for a long time. And within the business model, we also have areas revenue sharing. For example, it's one of the models that we have with our customers who would be fleet operators, and that helps. And one good thing is that the vehicles keep generating revenue over a long time. It is kind of, it's kind of comparable to say if you were Airbus and you manufactured an Airbus A320, this aircraft cost if I'm not wrong, north of 30 million per unit. But at the end of the day, you end up paying 5,000 to 6,000 rupees for a flight between say Bangalore to Pune. And but the beauty is these aircrafts, they let's say Vistara. Let's talk about Vistara. They don't have their aircraft just standing around. They want them to be working as long as possible, and
it's about utilization.
Exactly, okay. And the aircraft are also engineered to be able to do this, and it's in fact this is very in fact we are very similar to the aircraft industry when it comes to how we build our vehicles.
Okay, so let's talk about your batteries then, Dhawal. You have a very interesting cell form factor. You're going to import the cells from South Korea. Brilliant, not China. Very happy to hear that. Your pack's going to consist of 5,000 cells. So very similar to, in fact, the Tesla design where they have 18,000 such cells in thousands and thousands of cells, in fact, in a car. And your cell pack in the end is going to weigh 500 kgs, which is at the bottom of the car. You're going to be packing your own cells. Tell us about the chemistry you used, why, what is the form factor that you used and why, how did you work out the 500 kgs? And then finally, most importantly, how are you going to make sure that the fires that are happening in a lot of the Indian designed EVs, which are scooters mostly, will not impact your design in any way?
So with respect to chemistries, we are pretty flexible when it comes to chemistries. And in fact, chemistries are something which keep changing with time, and we definitely do not intend to be locked on to one specific chemistry, because each chemistry will have their own pros and cons. As we speak, on a daily basis, newer and newer chemistries start coming into the picture. So now our battery platform is essentially built to be super flexible. Now inside the battery, there are two major things. Of course, there are lots and lots of minor things to take care of. But with respect to the chemistry and how you manufacture your packs, one thing to take care of is how exactly do you assemble battery packs. And one of the reasons why assembling a battery pack after you have figured out the chemistries is because you have to meet safety standards, and one of the biggest challenges, in fact, the tolerances, especially if you are aiming for super high energy densities, because you have a lot of cells which are relatively very small compared to the rest of the vehicle, and you have thousands of them, and each one has to go at a specific place within very tight tolerances. Then each one is interconnected with the rest. It's talking to battery management systems. It's talking to it's sending energy from here to there. If you are fixed on a form factor and the chemistries keep getting better, it still is easier to integrate them. And we make sure that our battery management systems are capable enough and they are future-proof enough to account for these changes. So tomorrow, if we upgrade our chemistry, and it's not about that today. If we lock a chemistry, we'll for the next 5 years we'll keep pushing the same chemistry. If we can do better, if we can get better cells tomorrow, we'll be happy to integrate them. But in the backend, we are making sure that it does not take us a year to integrate those. We should be able to, just slap them on, code the BMS to accept those, and we are good to go.
What about protection from fires in terms of what's been happening in the Indian market? We've spoken to a lot of people. Some people have talked about summer temperatures make a difference. Some people have said it doesn't make a difference at all. It's all about your battery pack quality of your architecture design and the likes. What are your opinions on why they're happening and how you protected your own vehicle against that?
So, the three primary reasons or the three primary probable causes for a lithium-ion battery fire, no matter what the chemistry is, would be, the first one would be, as you said, temperatures. The second one would be cell abuse, which could be, thanks to an improperly functioning battery management system, for example. And the third variable would be manufacturing defects. And these cells are, truly state of the art, and they are like really, really packed. I'm pretty sure most of the listeners here would have seen videos of what is inside a cylindrical cell. It's a jelly roll with various layers, and one contaminant somewhere, even if it is not conducted, over a period of time can, spark a fire. So now, having understood the three primary causes, of course, these three primary causes can have their own sub causes, but to keep things simple, it's three causes.
Dhawal, you talked about BMS, we talked about charging. There are many charging protocol standards around the world. There's CCS1 in America, CCS2 globally, there's GBT in China, there's CHAdeMO in Japan. When you started, there was nothing like this in 2011. So in 2018, you would have had to make a decision on what charging protocol you were going to go down for your car. What did you decide in the end and why?
So we are strongly inclined on a combination of CCS2 and CHAdeMO. Because the reason is of course, so it's kind of similar to, the fight is kind of similar to the Apple iPhone charger versus the USB-C versus the USB-A. You have a charger, similar amounts of electricity are flowing in, similar fundamentals, but a charger is right there, but you cannot use it. So a combination of these two enable us to utilize the overall infrastructure better. In fact, I think infrastructure is one key thing for the overall adoption of electric vehicles. The reasons I say that is, so many people don't realize this. Many people take for granted that whatever power lines we have coming to our homes, but laying down these power lines is A, super expensive, and B, it's time consuming.
So this is probably the only car in the world that can do both. So I want to understand how, because no matter which car you look at in the world, right, from the Polestar through the Audi, they're built only for CCS. So they're two different connectors, CCS and CHAdeMO. Does that mean your car has two different charge ports, and you can approach it with CHAdeMO and you can approach it with CCS2? And then how does the BMS interface with these two different charge protocols? Or are you saying that you will export either a CHAdeMO version or a CCS2 version, and you'll make a CCS2 version for India?
Okay, so to answer this, our cars would not have two charging ports. It will be a single charging port, but there's some black magic in the backend. But this charging port will accept both.
Okay, so the charging port will be a universal CHAdeMO CCS2 charging port. Now that's very interesting. So you're clearly building a car for export because there's no CHAdeMO in India. There's a couple of Nissan Leafs, some I think not even registered in India, working in labs. I'm interested. I want to probe this a little bit more. What's going on here?
Okay, so to be honest, we would be happy to export our vehicles as well, and whatever engineering decisions we take as well, we are not limiting ourselves that okay, we are just building this car for India, so let's just stick with the Indian regulations. And to be honest, if you look at regulations for India and if you look at regulations for Europe, there's a lot of difference, and to achieve those you'll have to do a lot of back and forth in the back end. So right now the approach is that so to be honest, we are more than happy to export the vehicles, but India is the top priority for us.
Excellent. It'll be interesting to see how you achieve that. Most automotive companies run away from any kind of complexity to keep it as simple as possible to avoid any failure points. So I'd personally be quite keen to see and hope you'll be successful with this. Couple of rapid fire questions. Dhawal, your company has an interesting name, Pravaig. What does it mean?
Pravaig is a Sanskrit word. It essentially means ultimate achievable velocity.
Excellent. Sanskrit word as well. Beautiful. Also, you've always talked about taking back control, and that's in some ways a mission for Pravaig. What do you mean by taking back control?
Okay, so by taking back control, we mean multiple things. One is, going away from the cycle of everything being centralized. So, for example, we are building a fleet, and you have other fleets in the world, Uber, Ola, for example. Do you really know what ends up happening with your data? There's a centralized server somewhere. So in our case, we are building even these application layers in a way which are more decentralized. I don't know what car you own today, but no matter what car it is, the days of tinkering with your own car or fixing your own car or serviceability or these things are going away. We definitely want to bring these variables back into the picture, and we definitely do not want our business models to be so. For example, most OEMs, for various reasons, most of the revenues are made in the after sales, and the parts, the supply, everything is it's finely controlled. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be reliant on say we have a service station, you have to drive your car to that service station, get it fixed. And in fact, why not? Because one of the beauties of electric vehicles is there is much lower things which can go wrong.
Very little things that you need to do. That's true. You talked about Ola and Uber. Ola has teased its electric car. They're moving quite fast. You've talked about your own launch in the first quarter of 2024. How do you think Ola is going to impact your own plans? Here's another non-automotive company that's decided that it wants to make a car, and kind of in a niche space as well, just like yourselves.
I wish the best to Ola, but I honestly know very little. But what I do know is it's a small car. Ola is definitely not building a large vehicle like we are, and certain challenges I see are when it comes to So one thing I think holds true is you cannot overnight transition a city or a state or a country to electric. Because say imagine tomorrow Mumbai had 10,000 more electric cars suddenly, magically. Now how do you charge them? Where do you charge them? And either you make the vehicles capable enough of accepting fast charge. In that situation, maybe you just each vehicle is waiting in a line just for 10 minutes. It plugs in for 10 minutes fast charge and then it goes. Now the second variable is if you have a small car, you will definitely have a small range, which means you need to access this charging infrastructure daily, maybe twice a day. And in our case, in fact, this was one of the key decision-making factors. So in most cases, on an average, a vehicle would not travel more than 220 to 250 kilometers. And if we have a range of 500, we are visiting a charging station once every 2 days. So our reliance or dependency on how much infrastructure is there is still lower. Versus if we build a vehicle which needs to visit that same charging infrastructure twice a day, then there are many drawbacks. There is downtime, there is congestion, you need to keep up with the infrastructure, etc., etc.
Excellent. So Dhawal, I have one final question for you, and we ask this question to all the talent that comes on our show. And I apologize for the frivolous nature of this question, but it always brings out such a beautiful pointed answer that we choose to always press on with it. And the question is this: if you were to be able to be Prime Minister of India for one day, just one day, and could make any decision you wanted for faster adoption of electric vehicles in India, what would that decision be?
Okay, so I think the adoption of one of the bottlenecks is bringing in technology. Like there are certain elements, like as I said, like we are trying to build most of the vehicles by volume, more than 70% by volume in India. But the last 20% is the most difficult. And today, when it comes to say if you are importing something or if you are importing a technology built for electric vehicles, for whatever purpose, maybe to reverse engineer or to actually implement, then the import procedures are, I think the procedures could be smoother, faster. Like we lose a lot of time in, paperwork today. So I'll try to figure out a solution to that.
True. Excellent. That's a great answer. Dhawal, you're obviously a very intelligent man, and it's great to see that you've chosen to use your intelligence and talents by creating a company and being an entrepreneur rather than disappearing into the dark abyss of a large company where your ideas would clearly not be listened to because they're so radical. You've chosen to be a dewdrop on a leaf rather than a drop of water in the ocean. Your ideas are brilliant. What you're trying to do with your car is amazing. From all of us at Energizing India, we do hope that Pravaig is going to be incredibly successful. Look forward to seeing your first car launch and driving it also one day. And if you ever need to do any homologation testing on a charge station, feel free to drop into the Energizing India studios and use our very large DC hypercharging station here to test your car. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ravin. Cheers.